trout set, but yeah, definitely was.
Alright, we are going to be tying the LP Chironomid. There could be a different name for this pattern. I don't know what the name is. I couldn't find this exact pattern. At the end of the day, it's a Chironomid. Main difference, I know Fly Fish Food has one, but this is the body glass. Add some flash on top. And then these gills are out of some Life Flex. A buddy sent me this pattern, so it is not my pattern. But here we go. So in the hook, I have the Fulling Mill FM 5115. It's the heavyweight Grub hook, I think is what they call it. In black nickel. And this is a size 12. And then for a bead on this, I'm using Tungsten 2.8 millimeter bead in metallic brown. For thread, I'm going to be using a brown ultra thread in 70 Denier. But to get going, we're going to start with some lead-free wire. This is in 020. So when I do this, I always wrap towards me so that when you tie your thread in and start covering that up, your thread's going to be going this way. It's not going to try to unwind that lead-free wire. And I do 5 wraps. And when I get to that 5th wrap, I'm going to just take my fingernail and dig it in and then just helicopter that out. And then I'm going to push that all the way up, make sure it's just seated nicely in there. And I'm not going to tear that off quite yet. The way I do it, I take my thread, put a few wraps down, snip it. Then I'm going to come right back up to that thread, to that wire. And just put some wraps on this side of it. I'm going to pull pretty tight. And it comes off real nice. And then I actually, because where that body glass is going to end, I try to smush that down a little bit so I don't get a huge bump right there. All right. So for the body glass, I'm using the body glass in brown. It's the round. The code is 22, so I guess that's the size of it. So I'm going to clip off just an 1.5 inches, 2 inches of it. Now the trick to tying this in, especially on a Chironomid, is we don't want to build up this body. So you can't, this stuff is stretchy, but it's not going to completely thin out to make that a smooth body without building bulk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lighter and just barely touch it to the end. And then I'm going to pull and let it cool for just a second. You can see it. You can see the difference in thickness there. It gets super thin. Even when it's that thin, it is extremely, extremely tough. So you can really pull on it and it just doesn't break. This body glass is awesome. So I'm going to take a little bit and leave a little bit hanging out right behind that lead-free wire. And then I'm going to go ahead and get a couple wraps in so I can pull tight. And I'm just going to pull this and keep it right on the top of the hook. Maybe a little towards my side so when I wrap it rolls over. And I go a decent amount down this bend and right to where that starts building back up. Then I'm going to come back through. Thread wraps don't have to be absolutely perfect. You just don't want it. You just don't want any lumps anywhere. Next, I'm just going to slide my scissors in here to lift that up and grab up my fingers, pull tight, and clip out. And I'm going to put a couple half inches in right here just so my thread doesn't go anywhere. I like to use the rotary because I keep the same tension the whole way as I'm going. So get that. I'm going to go ahead and throw that on my thread holder, bobbin holder, I should say. All right, this first wrap, as I wrap, you have to make sure that first wrap doesn't try to slide down the bend of the hook. So once I'm there and you got that first wrap, it's pretty easy. But I keep a fair amount of tension on this the whole way up, as you can see. And if you change your tension, you will see it in that body glass. And I just wrap it all the way, pull real tight. You got to be careful when you're tying this in, that when you got to get it good and tied in. So I'm just doing a few drop wraps to build up some thread behind that, and I haven't let tension off yet. Then I pull that thread tight. One more. Okay. So I have enough thread on there that it's not gonna suck under when I and come out. So I pull up and clip. And you can see there is a little bit of a bump on that side. So what I do, that's that last little wrap. All I do is take my thread and just get a good tie in right there, because that's where it's going to come out if it is to slide. So next, now I'm going to go through this lead-free wire. Just kind of lash it down a little bit. Come to the front. Next, I'm going to use this, the Veevus Pearl and Medium. Alright, so I've got a nice little piece cut off. What I like to do, I lay it kind of on the close side of the hook and then use my thread to pull it over to the top. And then it just puts it in perfect placement. And I'm going to wrap all the way back to where that bump was. That's kind of how I know that lead-free wire gives me the size of that front thorax on a chironomid, but really where the gills start and are going to come up to the bead. So I'm going to tie that in. I'm not going to focus on putting a ton of wraps yet. And then next, I'm going to use either Flex Floss or Life Flex. In my Instagram quick tie tutorial, I did use this white Life Flex. I've tied about a dozen or more with that white. So now I'm going to actually use Fulling Mills, the Floss, Flex Floss. And this is in Fluorescent Hot Coral. So take a piece. I'm just going to cut 2 smaller pieces, about 1 inch long, just enough so I can grab them and tie them easy. I'm going to come right up to the bead, and I'm going to leave some hanging out so I have something to grab onto to cut it. I'm going to get that first wrap in. Let me make sure I have it where I want it. And I want it on the upper half of the side of the hook, if that makes sense. I'm going to tie that in, and then I'm going to stretch so I don't build up any bulk going back. And again, I'm going to bring it all the way back to where that flash is tied in, or that tie-in ends for that. I'm going to come right back to there. The stuff you can pull it pretty tight, and when you clip it, it just sucks back under that thread. So make sure those thread wraps are tight going in there. I'll take my next piece and do it on my side of the hook, which is top secret. Y'all can't see this side of the hook. Again, kind of the upper half, if you will, of that body. Stretch, and then pull it all, bring it all the way back. Alright, so now I do want to go up. On my way up, I'm going to do some wraps and make sure I have everything kind of even and covered up. Oh, you can see that side of the hook now. I'm going to pull up, trim. I'm just going to build a slight taper, not too much because we still got stuff to tie in. Alright, so on this part, this is why I keep that hook pointed up like that in the vise. First, we're going to take our Flex Floss, and I'm going to pull fairly tight on this. On the small Life Flex, you really don't have to pull tight, too tight, because it gets so thin, and that white it almost kind of becomes transparent if you stretch it too thin. So I'm going to do a drop wrap and then get that Flex Floss right where I want it. I'm going to do a tight wrap behind, tight wrap in front, and come through. I'm not going to pull too tight because I only have a couple wraps in there. But you can still get it to go pretty flush. Same thing on this side. I'm going to do a drop route. I'm going to switch hands. And I'm going to get this right where I want it. I want my thread right behind that bead. And I want that flex floss kind of angled up towards the eye of the hook. Kind of in line with the eye of the hook from the back. Again, I'm going to pull a little bit. Yeah, you can see there's two little knobs in there. But I'd rather have those than completely cut that out and have to start that over. And once the resin's on there, you really don't even notice this. It all looks smooth. Alright, so I'm going to pull and go straight up and over with my flash. Make sure it's good in there. Pulled tight. I'm going to do 2 behind right at that bead. And I'm going to do 2 or 3 just to lay it back over itself. Then go back up again. Take it. I like to cut just a little and then pull. That way that top lays flat down and you don't have to worry about it sticking out of you. You don't have to worry about it sticking out of your resin. Alright, so I'm going to take my whip finish. I'm going to go make sure I'm right at the bead, kind of go up on the bead a little bit with this whip. Look carefully. Alright, I'm going to cut my thread. And one of these days I'm going to be prepared with all my things. Alright, how to get my resin. Alright, so I use a Solarez Bone Dry. To me, it's really the best thin resin you can get. It cures super quick. With that, when you do it thick, you got to be careful. Hold your light a lot further back than you're used to. You'll actually kind of see it smoke because it's curing so quick. And you want to avoid that. So I'm just going to coat this all around. Use that drop that's on there. Just make sure it's all around and it looks pretty even and smooth. Make sure you get that back so that body kind of all comes together nicely. Keep spinning it when you grab your torch. And then see, I'm going to start pretty far back as I'm doing this. Just kind of, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but you'll see it kind of smoke. And then I'll bring my light closer once I've gotten it cured a little bit. And this stuff, I mean, there's a fair amount on there. I mean, I put that thin coat on first just to make sure to get it all in all those little crevices. And then I put that one main drop on there to just spread it out the rest of the way. So it is going to take a second to cure. But I mean, 10, 15 seconds. And I mean, there's really no tack. There you have it. I call this the LP Chironomid. It's a big one. It's got some good flash. That fluorescent orange shows up really nicely. The lights, I mean, with that resin and with the lights, it is kind of harder to see those gills, but they look really, really nice in the water. So there she is.